Um, well, last week when Bob was speaking, he read a passage of scripture that brought to my remembrance a conversation I had with a person that believed that Yahweh created evil. And he said the adversary is only doing what he was created to do. And no, because Yahweh, he didn't create evil. Yahweh didn't create the adversary. The adversary created himself by the choice that he took, the decision he made. Before I get into all of that, I would just address, did Yahweh create evil, or does Yahweh do evil? It might seem at first that, Yahweh created all things, so then it would seem that he indeed created evil. But evil is not an object. It's not like rock or anything like that. You can't hold it, put it in, contain it, anything, nothing like that. So it's not an object. So evil in itself has no existence. If you really want to look at it, evil is the absence of good. That's what it is. Right. Ultimately, the absence of Yahweh. So if we keep that in mind, is that the absence of Yahweh is evil. Now, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. When you look at what the adversary, when he rejected, he being near to Yahweh, a covering angel, and then he rejects Yahweh, he became evil. He was in Yahweh's presence. So anyway, another illustration would be, does cold exist?
No.
No, it doesn't. Cold is the absence of heat. So if we keep these examples, this in mind, then as I go forward, you'll understand that Yahweh himself did not create evil. He does allow it, though, and that's what Bob mentioned last week, that Yahweh does allow evil. So the passage that Bob read was Isaiah 45. So we'll go there. Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45, verse 5. Pardon? Does Yahweh do evil, or did Yahweh create evil? I couldn't decide between the two, but they both kind of apply here. Isaiah 45, 5. And this is one thing this is what Bob read last week, but another brother pointed out another passage, and I'll read that next. It says, I am Yahweh, and there is no one else besides me. There is no Elohim. I will gird you, though you have not known me. Let's see. Oh, I started in 5. I'm sorry, it's verse 7. I wrote down 5. My apologies. See, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I am Yahweh that does all these things. Here he says, I create evil. Amos 3:6. We'll go there real quick. Hold your place here, but Amos 3:6 is the other one that somebody pointed out to me in reference. Amos 3 and verse 6. Shall the trumpet be blown in a city, and the people not be afraid? Shall evil happen to a city, and Yahweh has not done it? The implication is that Yahweh does evil. Yahweh creates evil. But, yes. Oh, the next verse? Okay. Okay. It's been asked to read. Okay. Surely the sovereign Yahweh will do nothing except he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. And that's interesting because these things are not done in secret. But then even that begs the question then, is it truly evil? So is Yahweh really the one who created evil? Well, let's look at the word translated evil. The Hebrew word evil is ra, number 7451, and is used in many different ways in the Bible. In the KJV, it occurs 663 times. 431 times it is translated as evil. And I saw this word, it says ontological evil, and don't ask me to explain it, you'll have to look it up, but it's like evil to the core, you know. So 232 times it is translated as wicked, bad, hurt, harm, ill, sorrow, mischief, displeased, adversity, affliction, trouble, calamity, grievous, misery, and trouble. So we can see the word does not require it to be translated as evil, wickedness. I'll say that as well. And so this is why different Bible translations verses is translated in mine it says evil, but in others I've seen calamity. This verse here in Isaiah 45. And I think in the NIV it's woe. This verse here in Isaiah 45 is woe. And I think in the New King James Version it's disaster. In reading this verse, though, it's important to take it in context. And a lot of times people take a verse, cling to it, and think, okay, I understand it, and this is what it means. But let's go back to 45 and start at verse 5. I wanted to point out verse 7 first, and then we'll go back. In Isaiah 45, verse 5, I am Yahweh, and there is no one else besides me. There is no Elohim. I will gird you, though ye have not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west, and that there is no one besides me. I am Yahweh, and there is no one else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I am Yahweh that does all these things. So looking at that term, reading the rest in context, is it like doing wrong? The other definitions that I read seem to apply here. The other 232 other definitions. So when I looked up in this particular passage, it says it's most interpreted as calamity. You see, what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? Not opposites, but contrast. I form the light. Yeah, I form the light and create darkness. Contrast. Yeah, and you see a contrast too. Yes. So I make peace and create calamity. So Yahweh is not doing an evil thing, but it's evil to us. But Yahweh is not doing evil himself. He allows it to be. I am Yahweh that does all these things. The context of the verse is dealing with who Yahweh is. That's it. Is that Yahweh is speaking of the natural phenomena, so light and darkness, so sunlight, and dark. And it is Yahweh who is able to cause well-being as well as calamity. And so this verse is dealing with natural disasters and human comfort issues. It is not speaking of moral evil. It is dealing with calamity, distress, and this is consistent throughout Scripture. And here's a few examples. Exodus 32. Exodus 32. And we'll read verse 9 through 12. And Yahweh said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now leave me alone, that my wrath may grow hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make you a great nation. And Moses prayed before Yahweh, his Elohim, and said, Yahweh, why does your wrath grow hot against your people, whom you have brought forth out of the land of Egypt, with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak, saying, for evil did he bring them forth, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath and repent of this evil in mind against your people. I think in the KJV it says evil as well. But this word here, again, looking up Ra, the application would be disaster, because indeed it would be a disaster if Yahweh did this. And Moses pointed out why it would be a disaster. It would be harmful, and it would be a calamity. So that Moses made a good argument here. He said, why will you do this and strengthen the hand of the enemy? So then, of course, we know what happened. Yahweh repented of it. So it would have been evil to Israel, but it's not an evil act of Yahweh. And you have to remember that sin has consequences. Thank you. I don't know why things are slipping my mind, words. But sin has consequences. And a lot of the things that befall are consequences for sin. And it is indeed evil to us, but it's not an evil act of Yahweh. Yes, David. Okay, go ahead, Rebecca.
Can you talk more about stiff neck?
About stiff neck?
Yes.
Well, stiff neck is to resist. Okay. You know, a stiff neck people is, I don't have a whole lot of experiences with horses, but I've ridden a few, and if you have one and you're trying to pull in the reins and the horse is pulling against you, it's not going to follow your direction. They stiffen their neck and pull the opposite of what you want it to do. And the same thing with I've led a lot of cows, and they'll do the same thing. You know, if they don't want to go somewhere, then they just stiffen up and pull back. So yes, David.
No,
and I got you, Tom.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to decouple the concept of evil because in our minds we look at it as something bad happening. Mm-hmm. When in actuality you have to look at the layers of what we determine or what we determine now as being evil. Mm-hmm. Like there is an action of immoral or sin that is considered evil in Yahweh's eyes.
Yeah.
But when Yahweh does something, or his judgment or his wrath, we see that as a calamity or something bad, and then we automatically want to attribute it's evil. Mm-hmm. Well, it might be evil to us, but
right.
Yahweh's judgment is not.
It's not. That's why I'm saying it's not an act of evil. Yeah. It is a consequence of.
Everything he does is just.
Is just, and that's key.
And so he cannot perpetrate evil.
Right.
As we do, or mankind does, or the fallen angels, or the adversary. And so all of his creation has the actual choice to be good or evil.
Right.
Yahweh doesn't has the same choice, but he would never choose to be evil.
Well, yeah, because Yahweh's word stands. Mm-hmm. And Yahweh has said, I am righteous and just and true. So there's no, where's that passage that says there's no shadow of turning with Yahweh? Because he doesn't change. Yeah. And I was going to write that passage down and I didn't. But I read it this morning, but you know, Yahweh doesn't change.
One last thought, you know, I don't know if you're going to have an example of Sodom and Gomorrah, but in that situation, they did evil in the sight of Yahweh. Mm-hmm. He tried, or Abraham tried his best to plead his case for them. So that he would
or Lot, yeah, Lot. Mm-hmm.
Because of Lot. But did the fire that rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah, was it evil? Or was it just judgment on a wicked and evil people?
Right, and just judgment. And see, that's why I kind of decided to speak on this, because the term evil is used, but if we truly know Yahweh, know who he is, we understand Yahweh, then we understand that this word evil, it's a general use, but it's not moral, it's not ontological, and I'm sorry, you guys have to look that up, but ontological, and which is like evil or wickedness to the core. It's like, that there's no, Yahweh has no part in that. The next one, First Chronicles. First Chronicles 21. First Chronicles 21:14. So Yahweh sent a pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men, and Elohim sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it. And as he was about to destroy, Yahweh beheld, and he repented of the evil, and said to the destroying angel, "It is enough. Now withdraw your hand." Now this came after what? David took the census of Israel, and he wasn't supposed to do that because Israel's supposed to trust in Yahweh and not rely on their numbers to measure themselves against their enemies. Again, the word here is ra, but it's defined as disaster. This was a disaster that Yahweh brought upon, and David recognized it as such, and he prayed about it. It's also calamity, but Yahweh saw the suffering, and so he ceased. Now, Yahweh is just. Years ago, and I mentioned this before, I was talking to someone, and we were discussing about when Yahweh would either send a plague in Israel or whatever because of their sin. And I said, who died? Was it just random people dying? But Yahweh being just, again, we know not the number of our days. And there were people who sinned, and they were the ones that were held responsible, just like at the Mount. When Aaron made the calf and Israel sinned at the calf, but not all Israel was destroyed. It was the guilty party, the instigators of it. Even the ones who probably pressured Aaron into making the calf. Aaron made the calf, but he wasn't killed. But the guilty die. So when in this situation, we don't know what they were guilty of, but Yahweh knows. But it was people whose time it was, I'll say. But we're just sticking to the point that this was, Yahweh saw it as a justified act, but it was indeed a disaster, a calamity, and suffering that people experienced. So it's defined here as an evil, not an act of Yahweh, but as is perceived by us. And I would say in the first one, Moses wasn't accusing Yahweh of evil. He just says, don't do this evil, meaning this disastrous act is not gonna play well in the years of in the unbelievers. Next one is Ecclesiastes, and I'm just using these as examples of the use of the word evil. Ecclesiastes 1:13. Oh, yes.
Shadow of turning, that's in James 1:17.
Oh, James 1:17 is where, thank you. The reference I made to, there's no shadow of turning with Yahweh. That's James 1:13, so thank you very much. 1:17, okay, James, 1:17, thank you. I didn't turn to Ecclesiastes. Let me get there real quick. And, it's surprising that, there are some who really believe that Yahweh is capable of doing evil because they misunderstand what this says here. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. My apologies here. There we go. Whew. Thanks for turning on the fan. Okay, Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 13. And I applied my heart, and this is King Solomon, I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. It is a great travail that Elohim has given to the sons of men to be afflicted by it. Travail is another. In most, the KJV says evil, a great evil. But it's a grievous burden, sore or also sad travail, or task, a heavy burden, an unhappy business. These are terms that are applied right here. In mine it says travail, but in others it'll say evil. So these are just a few examples that I looked up. You can find all kinds of applications. Like it says here, there's 232 other applications. I just picked a few here. But I want to go to Job because that's significant, and what Job says and what is said of in his situation. And it'll be Job 2. I'll just start in verse 7. So Satan went forth from the presence of Yahweh and struck Job with severe boils from the sole of his foot to his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself with it, and he sat among the ashes. Then said his wife to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Renounce Elohim and die." But he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of Elohim, and shall we not receive evil?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. It would seem that Job was accusing Yahweh of evil, but yet it clearly says here he did not sin with his lips. So in reading these, we have to see it as not the immoral acts, not an act of wickedness on Yahweh's part. The term here is receive adversity or troubles or receive bad. Also, verse 11 of chapter 42. I'm kind of putting these two together here real quick because it's at the conclusion of the matter. Verse 11. Then came there to him all his brethren and all his sisters, and all they that had been of his acquaintances before, and ate bread with him in his house. And they bemoaned him and comforted him concerning all the evil that Yahweh had brought upon him. Every man also gave him a piece of money, and every one a ring. All the evil that Yahweh had brought upon him. Now, I'm going to bridge this real quick, because Yahweh did indeed bring this upon him. But it wasn't evil. Remember at the beginning, what is evil? The absence of good. What did the adversary accuse Yahweh of? Hedging him about and protecting him. So what did Yahweh do? He took his protection away. He removed himself from Job. So the adversary had access to him. That, the absence of good, evil, allows evil, you see. Right. Now, the adversary accused Yahweh of protecting him, so Yahweh removed himself from Job's protection and said, okay, he's in your hands. That's what Yahweh said. But he set the limits. He said, touch all he has, but you can't touch him in the first round. But what is interesting is that Yahweh took responsibility. It all falls under his authority. And so Yahweh, what did Yahweh say? He said, see, I didn't write this down, but where Yahweh said that you moved me to move against him. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to find it here because anyway, I didn't mark it and didn't write it down. But anyway, Yahweh, it said that because of the adversary's challenge, Yahweh had already declared that Job was perfect.
Chapter 2, verse 3.
Verse 3. Okay, I didn't go up high enough. Thank you very much, David. And Yahweh said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there's no one like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that fears Elohim and turns away from evil. And he still holds fast his integrity, although you moved me against him. Did Yahweh do something to Job? Yahweh himself didn't do anything to Job. All Yahweh did was step back. But Yahweh is acknowledging his authority over evil and the adversary, the evil one. So Yahweh's saying, you're challenged to move me against Job by what? Stepping back from him. You moved me against him to destroy him without cause. That's an acknowledgement that everything is under Yahweh's authority. And he established it by setting the limits at first. He said, you can touch all he has, but don't touch him. And then the next round, he says, okay, touch him, but don't take his life. The adversary could not go beyond the limit Yahweh sets. And we have to keep that in our minds, brethren. When we're going through the ringer, we have to understand that if Yahweh chooses to remove himself from us for a moment, and we're going through something, we know that Yahweh knows, and it is all under his authority, and there's a purpose to it. But we have to remain steadfast and faithful like Job did. Job maintained his integrity. 1 Samuel 16. First Samuel 16. First Samuel 16, verse 14. It says, now the spirit of Yahweh departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Yahweh troubled him. And Saul's servant said to him, behold, now an evil spirit from Elohim troubles you. Did Yahweh send an evil spirit? Perhaps, but, by Yahweh removing his spirit from Saul, that created a vacuum, didn't it? So the void was filled by an evil spirit. But it came from a rebellious heart, you see. And we have to remember that. That's kind of a key thing, is that Yahweh does no evil. He allows it. He can limit it, can stop it, or he sends it. But in this case, because of the heart of Saul, Yahweh removed his spirit because Saul had a rebellious heart, and he just would not recognize within himself his fault or his error, and he always made excuses. And you can read an earlier chapter, I think it might be 14, where when Saul received the spirit of Yahweh came upon him, and he became very angry, and he cut up an ox and sent it to all the land of Israel, and said, this is the way it's going to be to your oxen if you don't come to me. And so all the Israelites came, and they went to war. And so that's when Saul was exalted, and they made him king, and so on and so forth. But now we get to this point. Now Yahweh takes his spirit from him. And so the void, the removal of good, there's the evil. So that's the result of Yahweh's departure. And we don't want that to happen to us, because what is that? The unpardonable sin, is it not? We reject the spirit of Almighty Yahweh. And so I read this to lead into what I said about Yahweh sending. So let's go to 1 Kings 22. 1 Kings 22. And we'll start reading in verse 13. Now, I'll just read it. And behold, a prophet came near to Ahab, king of Israel, and said in this manner, says Yahweh, have you seen all the great, First Kings, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. I was in 20, not 22. There we go. All right, yeah, First Kings 22, and I'll begin reading in 13. And the messenger that went to call Micaiah spoke to him, saying, behold, now the words of the prophets declare good to the king with one mouth. Let your word, I pray you, be like the word of the one of them, and speak you good. And Micaiah said, as Yahweh lives, what Yahweh says to me, that will I speak. And when he had come to the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? And he answered him, go up and prosper, and Yahweh will deliver. It is into the hand of the king. And Yahweh will deliver it into the hand of the king. And the king said to him, how many times shall I command you that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of Yahweh? And he said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And Yahweh said, these have no master. Let them return, every man to his house in peace. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? And Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him, on his right hand and on his left. And Yahweh said, who shall entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said, in this manner, and another said, on that manner. And there came forth a spirit and stood before Yahweh and said, I will entice him. And Yahweh said to him, with what? And he said, I will go forth and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, you shall entice him and shall prevail also. Go forth and do so. Now, therefore, behold, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and Yahweh has spoken evil concerning you. Now, it would seem that Yahweh is doing something bad here, does it not? But it seems like it's the accusation that same that some people give when Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart. You have here these prophets. I believe there were 400 of them if you read earlier in this chapter. And these prophets are not the prophets of Yahweh. So the fact that they may have declared themselves to be prophet was a lie already, is it not? So if they're not prophets of Yahweh, yet they declare themselves to be prophets and they're prophesying to the king, they're prophesying what they want to happen instead of what Yahweh has said will happen. So the lie was already there. You could say that he strengthened their resolve or hardened their hearts by going ahead and telling the spirit, okay, go. But it was already in their hearts. It's the same thing with Pharaoh. Pharaoh probably had a moment where he was weak and said, okay, I'll do this. But then then he changed his mind. It wasn't coming from the heart. It wasn't something that he was just doing it from the pressure, but not from the heart. Yes, Tom.
Well, Scripture, I don't want to insert this in the flow. It might be worthy to bring it up again, but in the half-brother of Joshua and James, the first chapter, it tells us in verse 13, and this seems to be germane to what you're teaching today, let no man say when the man, he is or she is tempted, I am tempted of Yahweh. For Yahweh cannot be tempted with evil.
Right.
Can he be tempted? It was not in his divine nature that we're to be partakers of.
Mm-hmm.
Neither tempts he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away by his. Here's where choice comes in, like in Deuteronomy 30, that might be worth going to a little later.
Mm-hmm.
He's tempted when he is drawn away by his own mind or thinking, his own lust, and enticed. Then when lust has conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin ultimately finished, it brings forth death. But it was brought out earlier that by Sister Karen, that every good and perfect gift is from above. Comes down from the Father of lights, in whom is no change, variableness, neither shadow or turning. Because of his own will, he begat us with the word of truth, that we should be kind of first fruits of his creatures. It seems to be very, very plain to me that human choice and behavior is what generates consequences. It's been aptly pointed out earlier, and that's where the evil or calamity lies, and not
Right.
Now, on the other hand, Yahweh does test,
Oh, yeah.
like Abraham, when he finally said, "Now I truly know you." When the dagger was coming down, and he heard the bleating of a type of Messiah, which was the ram in the bramble bush, so to speak, and he was testing him, but he was not creating an evil condition
Right.
of having the son of Abraham murdered. I think it's very clear. We're not supposed to be saying that when we're tempted of Yahweh, because he doesn't tempt.
He doesn't, right. And it's the same thing. That's the secret, and I'm glad you pointed that out with Abraham, but that's also the same thing with Job. He already knew Job, but he allowed Job to be tested and proven. And I've always used that as an example of the refining that we all are going through, or that we will go through. That refining, it seems like the more faithful and righteous, the more severe the refining. Abraham, that was severe.
Is that because the Bible clearly says the formula is to whom much is given,
Much
then consequently much
is required, correct. And that's absolutely true. But that shouldn't discourage us, because the nearer to Yahweh we draw, the stronger we are. And that's why it requires a strong test. Because, weak tests are for the weak. And, we have to kind of keep that in mind. The strong tests are for the strong. And each test is to strengthen us and not to destroy us. It's interesting here that there were, at any time there's one priest, one prophet. Well, I shouldn't say that, because I think Jeremiah and Isaiah, and there were several of them that were concurrent together. But they all had pretty much this. They had the same message, similar message to Israel.
Robert,
Yes, David.
and that's kind of what I was going to say, kind of circling back to, Micaiah told him exactly what Yahweh said, but that's not what he wanted to hear.
Right.
So therefore, he went and chose his choice to choose to listen to someone that was going to tell him exactly what he wanted to hear, which was evil. And so, and matter of fact, I find it funny that he called Micaiah evil for what he was predicting for him, and the people that said what was not true to be good. So he just good for evil, evil for good type of concept, which further put him in the situation he was in.
Right. The priests told him what he wanted to hear, because that would keep them in favor with the king. The king figured, we're going to go and to battle, we're going to win this battle. But it was Jehoshaphat that said, let's inquire of Yahweh first. It was Jehoshaphat that asked, we inquire of Yahweh first. But it was Ahab that had already decided, we got this. So it was Ahab that died. But 400 prophets. And it kind of reminds me of Eliah and the 800 priests of Baal. Was it 800? Why so many? But Yahweh works through one, and it seems like the others work through so many. But so yes, this here is a consequence of unbelief, a consequence of one's own actions. But it was the term evil here again is not the wickedness, but it's a consequence of of his actions and unbelief. So the origin of evil, and I'm talking about the true evil. Since Yahweh does know evil, he didn't create evil, but the originator of evil, as we all acknowledge, is the adversary. And when we read in Ezekiel 28, the prophecy to the king of Tyre, It was speaking to the power behind that throne. The power behind the throne was the adversary. And I make this statement all the time, is that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spirit and the power, the principality, the influence in this person's life. The person stands before you, what Yahshua say, love your enemies. The person stands before you may be your adversary, but you understand that that person is being influenced. So you're not dealing, you don't deal ill with that person, So the king of Tyre being addressed, but he's speaking to the power behind the king of Tyre, which is the adversary. And he said, in the day you were created, you were perfect until iniquity was found in you. The adversary wanted to rule. He wanted to reign. He wanted to replace Yahweh. So you could say he committed suicide because he desired to replace Yahweh. He changed from being a servant to serve to an adversary. A lot of people say the first lie was to Eve, but the first lie was to himself. I will ascend on high.
Right.
That's the first lie right there.
Yeah, Eve is not called the father of lies. He's called the
He-
father of lies. She happened to be duped, according to what it says in Timothy.
Mm-hmm.
Long before Eve came along, in eternity, however long it was, we have this origin that was in our adversary's behavior.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so when we recognize the originator, we all acknowledge it, but then for some reason we think that Yahweh created evil. Yahweh didn't create evil. When he created man, he created us in his likeness. In his likeness, which is key, and in his image. But the likeness is the key there, because when Yahweh created, at the end of his creation, he declared everything to be what? Very good. When Yahshua existed in the flesh and they called him good master, he says, why do you call me good?
Yep.
Why? Because he existed in the flesh. He existed in this flawed body. So he said, there's none good but the Father. And so Yahshua the Messiah has not taken to himself what belongs to the Father. Even though he, being the son of Yahweh, he didn't take it. So when Yahweh created us in his likeness, and we turn around and we say that he put in us a sin nature, does Yahweh have sin nature? So if he put us in his likeness, to say that he put in us sin nature, that means we're like him. Yeah, but Yahweh has no sin nature. So what did Yahweh do? He gave us free will.
We're not spirit now either.
No, we're not spirit, but it was part of his plan. He made us of the dust of the earth because he had a plan. Since the adversary corrupted everything and destroyed everything previously, we know nothing before man. We don't know. Yahweh's not limited by time. We are. So it says, in the beginning, Yahweh created the heavens and the earth. Then in the Hebrew, it says the earth became waste and void, or became tohu wabohu, waste and void. So something happened. We don't know. Well, we could say the rebellion, but I'm not getting into that right now. But anyway, so Yahweh created us then he gave us, said, of all the trees you may eat. The choice was to eat of any tree that Yahweh said you could eat of. He says, but not this one, because in the days you eat of it, you shall surely die. So we could have been like Yahshua, who was faithful, or we could have been like the adversary. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so when they chose to do what Yahweh said not to do, that's where evil was introduced into man. Man was without sin. That introduced the sin nature, because even Scripture tells us sin was introduced through Adam, through man. Not Yahweh. It didn't say Yahweh introduced sin into the world. Our act introduced sin into the world. So I understand what the point people are trying to make, but Yahweh didn't create us. He didn't put in us, because that meant that was been in him too. If he made us in his likeness, and he declared everything very good, then I have difficulty understanding why Yahweh doesn't have sin nature. So that's something that somebody would have to really work hard to convince me of. I hear it all the time, but I'm not convinced of it. Yes, Bob.
Yahweh allows evil.
Yes, that's why he allowed the adversary. The adversary was there. He allowed the adversary. You know, he could have done like Job, just kept him completely away from Adam and Eve, but he didn't. Because
Evil is a factor in life,
yeah,
but Yahweh allows evil.
he allows it.
Now, so-
He could have destroyed the adversary the moment he
I can understand the translators saying that, yeah, he created evil,
Mm-hmm.
when in fact, what he did do was he allowed evil.
Yeah, but see again, that in Isaiah 45, it's you see the contrast. It's like light and darkness. So when you come to that word evil, it's not evil. It's calamity. Yahweh, you know, when he allowed like I use the angel that when David did the census, he sent the angel. You see, that was calamity. That was.
Yeah.
I'll get you in a second,
Yeah,
Raquel. You're
I
saying.
was just thinking that, calamity of and by itself is an experience that we have in this life. And so, I fully agree with what you're saying.
Mhm.
It's just that Yahweh allows these things to happen.
Oh yeah.
You've got opposites in
Right.
life, all
Right.
through life.
Right. Absolutely. It's just that when Yahweh
And
does
we
it,
love-
you know,
Excuse me, I was gonna say, and we learn that they don't work.
right.
That's just it. Evil will be, sooner or later, will be eradicated
Mm-hmm. Right.
by the ones that perform evil.
Right. Right. Raquel, you're
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, to put a finer point, I mean, Yahweh allows people to reject him,
right.
which is evil, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what he allowed. Like, he's not gonna force himself on people.
And that's the point.
Yeah.
He's the adversary is a ruler of this world.
And he's
That's why we have to, and that's in everything I talk about. I always emphasize that we have to work on a relationship with Almighty Yahweh because He is our strength, He is our help, He's our tower of safety. In His name, you know, we under His wings we receive protection, and so on and so forth. So if we think we're going to change anything, we're not called to change the world. We're called to be lights in this darkness. And so that means putting up with a lot of bad things. If your enemy slaps you, does it say punch him back? You know, no, it says turn the other cheek. If they take your coat, give them your coat too. That goes against our human nature. And that's what we have to overcome. Our human nature. Yahweh says vengeance is mine. So that means we don't take it, we don't go after people. So anyway, so I bring that up. Yahweh, if we uphold Yahweh as righteous and true in our hearts and our minds, that there is no evil with Yahweh, that Yahweh cannot be tempted. Yahweh didn't create evil, but He allowed the evil to come into existence. And it all serves His purpose.
Absolutely.
Because we have to make decisions every day. And if we decide towards Yahweh, we draw near to Him. Does that mean we won't make mistakes? We won't do something wrong? No, but that's where the covering of Yahshua comes. His blood. We repent and we experience the sorrow, the regret, and then we stand up and keep moving forward. So Yahweh is pure, and he doesn't approve of evil. Deuteronomy 32:4. Okay, Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32:4. The rock, His work is perfect. He declared everything very good. at the end of his creative work. For all his ways are justice. So do we doubt Yahweh? Or does Yahweh do evil when all his ways are justice? And El of faithfulness and without iniquity. So we have to be careful of, and I'm not saying brethren are accusing him. I think it's just a statement of not realizing and misunderstanding when they're reading these passages and they're saying, Yahweh, he created evil. Well, no, he creates the situations like when he opened up the earth and swallowed up Korah and Dathan and all of them. It was evil to them, but it was justice to Yahweh. They were rebellious and inciting rebellion. Just and right is he. We have to keep this in mind. Yahweh does not approve of evil, and I'm talking about the moral evil, immoral acts, or the unlogical, evil to the core kind of stuff. The unrepentant heart, those who refuse to have Yahweh in their knowledge, and so on. And Habakkuk, the minor prophets. Oops, that's Hosea, not Habakkuk. Habakkuk. Habakkuk 1:13. You that are of purer eyes than to behold evil. I'm bringing up these passages so we make the distinction between the words that we read and hear, and also to encourage us that if something doesn't seem right, look it up. Sadly, too many people take it at face value when they see the word evil, and you can't apply that to Yahweh in that sense. You that are of purer eyes than to behold evil, and that cannot look on perverseness. Why do you look upon them that deal treacherously, and hold your peace, when the wicked swallow up the man that is more righteous than he? And that goes to what we were talking about a moment ago, is that Yahweh allows these things to happen, but if our hope and our strength is in Yahweh, then we would have the mindset of Daniel and his friends, that when facing even death, we trust Yahweh. Daniel went down without screaming and wailing, and his friends said, we may die, but we're not bowing to the image. So the word Ra has been translated as evil from the Hebrew. The word evil has been translated from the Hebrew word Ra, R-A-H. But we know that Yahweh does not create evil in the moral sense, but in the sense of disaster and calamity, trouble, and so on and so forth. So what Yahweh does towards us it can be understood in those terms rather than an act of wickedness. Yes, David.
I find it fascinating that you take the Hebrew word for evil, and the actual Egyptian deity of the sun god is the same name.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
So
right.
Ra.
worshiping
In
the
fact,
sun.
coincidence.
Yeah, is it a coincidence?
I
Yeah.
kept hearing this.
It occurred to me when I was doing it, but I said I'm going to try to stay focused.
Then you take it one step further, that is attributed to the adversary,
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
evil, Ra,
Right.
deity of the Egyptians.
That
is the
has my
adversary.
hair on it, just think about it.
Yeah.
We'll take
Yes,
that
Tom.
back here, what we got there on that, but I will say, it's not to play with words, but it seems rather ironic in English that evil spelled backwards is life. It's life.
Yeah. Oh,
He says,
I didn't think of
command
that.
you do that before you life and good and death and evil, and I command you, Deuteronomy, to choose. Here's where free will comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And choose life. Apparently, living in eternity and having eternity, which beyond my pay grade, but whose understanding is infinite, besides characterizes the Lamb that was slain before the first foundation of this age. A plan to know that with free will there be the potential
Mm-hmm.
to disobey and sin. And so when you read in Isaiah 5 that woe unto them that speak to those that are evil as if they were good, and those that are good as if they were evil.
Evil.
They just turn inside out.
Right.
And we are not to in any way impute evil to our Creator. And yet, here's this magnificent revelation in 2 Corinthians 5. This is the Father in verse 21 of 2 Corinthians 5. For he made him, that's Messiah, to be what produces evil, to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that, oh, hallelujah, we might be made the righteousness of Elohim in Messiah.
In him, right.
What a wondrous thing to behold.
And see, and that's going back to what was spoken earlier. That's why Yahweh had a plan, and that's why we were made of the dust of the earth. We weren't made spirit beings, because Yahweh, in his infinite wisdom and in his plan, put us in a situation where it's about making decisions every day. We face where we can go, we can do righteousness or evil, and choose good. But that's why Yahshua had to come, because we cannot do it. We cannot, especially in this imperfect form, and with the sin nature that was inherent in us because of the fall of Adam and Eve. He's made a way. So we have to understand he's not seeking to destroy us. We have to remember this life is temporary. This isn't our permanent existence. And so once we come to understand that this is our training ground. This life is our training ground. And so we, through studying the Word, drawing near to Yahweh, trying to put into practice, but especially overcome our own character, our own flawed nature, our fleshly nature. Yahshua has given us the example, and we must strive to walk in it. And so, but I just wanted to address, like I said, I've heard many times where people are just, they believe that Yahweh created evil, and that Yahweh does evil because of their misunderstanding of some of these passages. And there's a whole lot, there's several others, but I just wanted to use a few as an example. And what Bob read last week, it just got my mind going. And my discussion with that fella, he's saying that, the adversary is created by the Heavenly Father, and he's only doing his job, what he was created to do. Well, then, is Yahweh just and righteous? Is Yahweh just and righteous if he's going to condemn and destroy him? But no, he did it he created himself through his making the decision to serve himself. So, yes, David.
Like you said, iniquity was found in him.
It wasn't created in him. It was found in him. Remember, evil is not an object.
You have to remember, that's what I go by. We have the ability and the choice to make. He gave that to us.
Mm-hmm.
Satan and his angels did too.
Exactly.
Therefore,
It was a.
go against God's law. God's law is everywhere.
Mhm.
The whole universe is governed by God's law.
It is.
Everything is.
That's right.
The seasons, the magnetism, and all.
Mm-hmm.
And we have us, which are created beings, whatever, and the angels are created beings too. They have the ability to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they decide to go against his laws, all of them, and any of them, bad things happen. Evil happens. We create. the
Right.
evil by
Yahweh-
doing it.
Well, we're gonna see the result of it.
We
as
will.
go
We
along.
will get the result of it, that's right.
Right. Yahweh he didn't create robots. He doesn't want us to.
No, he was not a robot.
All of the created beings have free will. And how do you use it? And when we use it for righteousness and justice, then we're honoring Yahweh. We're imitating Yahweh. So otherwise it's self-serving, and if we do things, make decisions to serve the flesh, then surely we're destroyed, because the flesh is only temporary. We're made of the dust, and to the dust we return. But if our lives are lived for Yahweh, then the spirit he has given us is in his hand, and he'll restore us again. So evil is not an object. Evil is the absence of good, and we certainly don't want to have that in our lives. So, anyway, brethren, there's a lot more scriptures and all, but I just wanted to just put this out there because there's so many, and I'm really afraid that and it's not an accusation against Yahweh, but when you say that he created us with a sin nature, you're saying that Yahweh has a sin nature if we're made in his likeness.
And if someone doesn't understand what you're saying, they can actually
Exactly.
take and grab a hold of that and extend themselves by, promoting that and creating some doctrine around it and
Yes.
getting other people to believe it. So
Yeah,
those
so,
of us that understand the concept, we're good, but those
Well,
that don't.
God, when he was
Yes.
on his earth, had free will too.
yes,
When Satan tempted him up on the mountain and all, he could have went and followed Satan and bowed down to him, but he didn't do it.
right.
He could have done it, and it would have changed everything.
He made the choice always to uphold Yahweh first.
He made the choice.
Yes, Curtis.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd get to the short passage you have in Isaiah 66,
Isaiah 66.
verses 3 and 4.
Okay. Isaiah 66, verses 3 and 4.
Because this will help play a little clarity to what you've been saying.
Okay. He that kills an ox is as he that kills a man. He that sacrifices a lamb as he that breaks a dog's neck. And he that offers an oblation as he that offers swine's blood. He that burns frankincense as he that blesses an idol. Yes, they have chosen their own ways, and their soul delights in their abominations. Choices.
Now go on to verse 4.
I also will choose their delusion and will bring their fears upon them, because when I called, none did answer. When I spoke, they did not hear, but they did that which was evil in my eyes, and chose that in which I delight not. And it's to oppose Yahweh, the absence of good. The
Now,
absence.
delight in evil, delight in wickedness. He'll bring the appropriate
Consequence.
consequences upon
Calamity.
you. Oh, you love this? You're digging it here.
Yeah, here you go.
Because that's expounded on more specifically in 2 Thessalonians 2 for loving lies.
Yeah. Yep. So keep in mind, brethren, Yahweh does no evil thing, but we do suffer the consequences of our unbelief, the consequences of our actions, our sins, and so on. So I hope that everyone got a little something out of this. I know I did. So may Almighty Yahweh be praised, and we will return at 3 o'clock and for David, yes, with the sermon. Okay, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.